Hi, I'm Whack.
Hey, and I'm Pat, and this is a special edition of the Weekly Orbit. This week, ending Friday, June 7th, we're going to be focused solely on the big Houston upgrade. It's the first upgrade since Atlas over a year ago for Rocket Pool. Uh, our special guest today is the one, the only Jasper, a prominent community member, a pre-med student, an
Med
essayist.
student.
No,
Med
med
student.
student,
I'm
yeah?
sorry,
Full
med
med
student,
student.
an essayist, novelist, humanitarian. Is there any caps you don't wear?
I'm not good at too many sports. I like tennis, not that many others.
Are you play chess?
Oh, I do like chess. Thank
Hey,
you for the
did you
very kind
see?
introduction.
And he's an
You're
IMC
welcome.
member
Yes,
Yes.
IMC member.
who was actually number one in the electoral vote for a period there. I'm not sure if you still are or not, but that's pretty cool. A
Go
lot
vote
of,
for Val.
Yeah. Are you guys cricket fans?
I grew up with cricket, but I
Because
don't
I
really
saw
watch it.
USA beat Pakistan. Did you see
Yeah,
that?
so
Wow, that's big.
that was a
And
that's one of the worst
huge
results in
upset.
cricket ever.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
biggest upset
And
ever.
like
So
I don't know if
yeah,
it's the team captain of Team USA, but I think he's Indian, but he works in Silicon Valley, and he's a U.S. citizen, but
yeah.
he's like the leader of the USA team, and there's a whole feature. I don't know if it was the New York Times, I can't remember, but I read it yesterday. I was like, wow, that's a big upset,
That was
right?
huge. It was really, really
Yeah.
bad. Yeah.
Yeah,
I need
South
to probably,
Asia is very
yeah.
represented on this podcast right now.
I
Yeah,
mean,
like
we do provide a lot of the greatest technological advances to our current world environment.
That is true. That is true. So, Whack, you might notice I got a different look today. I got the beard shaved. I know, but there's a reason. There's a reason. I was doing a movie. I was a background in a movie. It's called the Crisis. No, the Panic. That was the other day, and it's about the 1907 financial crisis in the United States. J.P. Morgan. It's about him, and so I got in the chair, and the hairstylist is like, "Well, your beard's not big enough, so we're gonna shave it and give you the little mustache with the." She's like a little Sava flavor as well. So, but I thought Anthony Sassano, he trimmed his beard up, so I'm following in his footsteps, and I'm calling this the 4040. This is gonna be here. This could be like this until ETH is over 4,000 and RPL is over 40, and we're back to a zero point zero 0.01 ratio. So there it is. Are you next? That's what I wanted to Whack.
no, no. I think Jasper's like astrological dealing that he was sharing the other day. That's enough for our whole
Yeah.
community. I don't really do deal with this superstition stuff, so I'll leave it to you and Anthony Sano to shave your beards. I'm firmly out of that camp.
Well
You
spoken,
gotta
Whack.
do what it takes, man. Anything. We're
What it takes is
sacrifice.
buying more RPL. I didn't see you a part of the buy party the other day, so
I know. I was too busy making movies, Whack. Too busy making movies. In fact, let me share. I have a little screenshot, I think, open. Where is it? Maybe I don't. I thought I did. But, well, coming to a streaming service or theater near you in the next 1 to 2 years. And
we'll
hopefully
check
by
it out.
then, our RPL better be over 40 by the time this movie comes out, or we're in trouble. Okay?
And Saturn, hopefully, both parts.
Right. So we're going to focus on Houston now, guys. It's been a while. It is scheduled to be deployed July 17th,
June 17th.
June.
June 17th. Pardon me, which is pretty. It's coming up pretty close. It's 10 days. And so what we're going to do is talk about why is this? What is the upgrade? Why are we excited about it? And why don't we break it down first? Whack, why don't you tell us what is the main components in the Houston upgrade?
So the biggest part of the Houston upgrade is the new voting system that we're going to have. So it's moving from a snapshot-based voting system that is off-chain onto an on-chain voting system, which means that if a vote passes, then the changes that wants to be brought to the protocol will happen like via code execution instead of going off to another wallet, the Guardian wallet basically to implement those changes or anything like that. There still will be things that there are limitations with those changes. So some of the things will still need to be worked upon, like, for example, like the Saturn, what's going to go into the Saturn grade for Rocket Pool, that will still need to be voted on. Like, we won't be putting that code onto the system. That'll need to go through the ODAO and things like that. But this is like, smaller changes, like, where is the money going, the things that the Guardian wallet controls right now, and some other things as well. This is actually a really, really big deal because Rocket Pool, like a year and a half, 2 years ago, there was one big section of FUD about the protocol, and that was that the ODAO gets paid too much. And then once we fixed that a year ago, the next piece of FUD became there's this EOF Guardian wallet, and the team controls it, and they can do whatever they want, and they can, like, ruin the protocol and ruin your investment and all this horrible stuff. So that basically is the last big FUD about Rocket Pool. And by doing this system, it's going to take it all away and, like, fix it. Jasper, I'd love to get your ideas on what this upgrade means in terms of, like, further boosting decentralization for Rocket Pool.
Right. Yeah. So the Guardian address has been a major thorn in the side of Rocket Pool for a while now, as you mentioned. Prisma Finance, which is a collateralized lending protocol, did a big report on Rocket Pool, and that sort of kickstarted this whole emphasis on the Guardian wallet being decentralized. Having that now move to what's going to be introduced as a security council is massive. You guys are, I'm sure, familiar, and our listeners may be too, of the FIT21 bill. And this bill sort of outlines how the government's probably going to look at the process of a digital security becoming a commodity, which is going to be the holy grail for a majority of assets. Because just for a quick second here, can we talk about if RETH is a commodity based on all these tests? That means it's sufficiently decentralized to be put into ETFs, while BlackRock could just, without SEC approval, probably just start using RETH in that. I mean, this is far out, like crazy moon thinking, but it becomes in the realm of possibility. So these goals are absolutely worthwhile to focus on. And there was a period of time when that wasn't clear. When we were looking at the next steps from Atlas, there was at the time this huge ruckus around decentralization. So it was easier to make that our goal. But as the time has passed and tokenomics has, taken the front stage, it became a more of a morass. So Pat, what do you think about the two tides here, like the emphasis between going forward on decentralization versus focusing on tokenomics?
Yeah. So I think that I was before we were recording talking about so much emphasis recently has been on the failed tokenomics of RPO, and some could argue like we're behind in we should have been doing this a year ago, but we're on our post Atlas highs, and a lot of the FUD was about the ODAO. How do we decentralize? And some would say the tokenomics would take a long time to fix. We should have been on that. We finally got around to it. However, as you point out, the regulatory issue has now come and is front and center in crypto. FIT21 is the first time where we had serious legislation that is defining what is a security and what is a commodity. And with this upgrade, it seems that Rocket Pool is a step or two above most other protocols in terms of its decentralization. What does that mean? That means we could be a first mover, right? Like you mentioned that RETH example. If RETH passes the test of being a commodity, then your BlackRocks of the world and others could, potentially start staking that without concern from their legal counsel of whether are we going to get in trouble for doing this, which I think has been the impediment for traditional finance for a while. Is we kind of understand crypto, but our lawyers are telling us there's a lot of this isn't defined, and we need to be careful. So we're going to be conservative and just not get involved with it. So, yeah, perhaps the Houston upgrade is a good thing in that we're ahead of the rest of the pack in terms of decentralization.
To make that a bit more concrete, the two specific prongs of FIT21 that Houston is going to impact is the first prong being on voting, that no more than 20% of voting power can be owned by one organization. And this sort of further carries the implication that voting must be the process by which upgrades are carried out. So having on-chain voting is a clear requirement of FIT21. But then there's also another provision whereby no individual party can have unilateral access to make changes to the protocol, except in a few very specific circumstances. But then this is the clear example why the Guardian needs to be decentralized. So Houston really is tackling two major points of Fit 21, well ahead of the curve. Voting is going to be a huge hurdle for many protocols. 20% of voting power is the limit for all affiliated entities together. So all major whales, all founding partners, all employees, people who receive airdrops, those are affiliated persons. They cannot collectively own more than 20%. That's difficult.
Yeah, and just on that topic, I saw Vance Spencer was saying, after looking at this Fit 21, there's a lot of things we need to change. And then I thought, could that be because your venture capitalist firm is more than 20% in several protocols?
Yeah.
And that's what you're looking to change?
Yeah, I really believe that because after like 48 hours, once all the lawyers really started to read the bill, there was a big flip.
Yeah, right. Oh, that 20%. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you about the voting. What happens if why is on-chain voting why is that such an important part of this? Because snapshot voting, we can have less than 20% ownership, and doesn't that work too? But why does decentralized voting on-chain, how is it different?
So I can take this. It's what happens after the vote goes through, right? Like right now, you can have the snapshot. In fact, even with the on-chain voting, it's likely there'll be a module added onto snapshot, so we'll still be using the same interface. It's what happens after the vote goes through. So right now, the vote goes through, and then it's the Guardian wallet that goes and executes the vote. Whereas with the on-chain voting, the vote will go through and it will be executed automatically because it'll have the code in place as the vote goes through. And then another thing to remember is there'll be 2 stages of votes as well. So we'll have the first stage of vote, then we'll have an override period, and the Security Council will be monitoring it to make sure that everything is going okay. So there's the voting process is going to change completely, pretty much. We're all going to have to learn again about what happens at each stage, because I think right now the community has it quite figured out of how an idea gets put forward and how it goes through to a vote and how it gets implemented. I think that's going to get moved around a little bit, and there's going to be a few steps that get added along the way, like 2 rounds of voting instead of 1. The Security Council being involved, as there's no such thing as a Security Council right now. So these are things that we'll have to learn about and figure out together. But the fact is that it's going to make Rocket Pool a much more resilient, much more robust protocol, and it's amazing that we're a year ahead basically. From the ideation of this to the execution of this than other protocols are right now, because they're panicking now, like Jasper saying, they're the ones who need to fix this. If this Fit 21 bill doesn't go through now, which there's a chance it won't, there'll be a version of this bill that goes through the next couple of years, and it's likely this decentralization prongs, the test that it has with the 5 prongs, some form of that or the majority of that will still be included in the future bill that does get approved. So Rocket Pool's taking some really great steps here to circumvent that and get ahead of it, which is hopefully going to be a huge boon for it.
I want to add another perspective to this on topic of decentralizing and the value here. Beyond just Fit 21, it's also the right thing to do, and very much so in the spirit of Ethereum. That really no entity should have more than 20% voting power. Really, it should be on-chain voting, and the Guardian address shouldn't be able to do what it can currently. It's all what Rocket Pool should be, and I'm glad to see it's executing on the morals, because ultimately the morality of Rocket Pool is key to its value proposition. The idea of this maximally tail-resistant, censorship-resistant staking token goes hand in hand with the values of the community and the protocol. And we're evidently displaying our morals here. We are choosing to be decentralized. That is who we are.
Right. Even though it's hard. Okay, so just to put a little bow on that, Moak, with the decentralized voting. So if you're in the SEC office and you're thinking, is this a commodity or security, and you see that, okay, so this protocol, they voted on a protocol change, and then there was individuals who then implemented that change. they're seeing that, well, there's a control factor. Whereas you're saying with this on-chain voting, once the vote goes through, it automatically, systemically upgrades. There's no like human behind the curtain controlling things. It's just automatic, meaning it's decentralized. It's just a commodity, and there's no team of people running the show. Is that
Now,
what you're saying?
let's be clear here, right? There are other protocols that do versions of on-chain voting, and they use systems like Tally and others like off-the-shelf systems that are already there. The reason why it's so hard with Rocket Pool is because we have a novel voting system that no other protocol, as far as I know, uses, where the only people who can vote in Rocket Pool are those who stake with Rocket Pool and have RPL bonded on their node. Now that is a unique situation, which is why it's taken us so long to make this, is because we did it from scratch. It wasn't a situation of just going and buying a license with one of these voting companies, because there are some maybe I think one's called Aragon, is that right, Jasper? And there's others as well, I'm sure. I know like the Diva and Arbitrum use Tally. I don't know what the system is in the background, if that's different or not, but there are solutions out there. But the complexities of the Rocket Pool protocol and that desire for maximal alignment and maximal decentralization meant that Kane, the superstar, had to do it all from scratch, and the other team members as well. So a huge shout out to those guys, because I think it was more complex in the end than they had imagined it would be. So yeah, great work.
So Jasper, tell us a little bit more about the Security Council. That's another major part of the Houston upgrade.
Right, yeah. So the Security Council is going to be a new entity that is going to be core to the Rocket Pool protocol. It's going to be made up of members elected entirely by the PDAO. So this is not going to be like the ODAO, where it sort of started with the inception of the team and then they invited new members. This is a similar model of invitation, but it's going to be handled from the PDAO end. And this Security Council is going to act like a emergency switch. If things are going awry in the protocol, they will have the power to lock certain things down. In other cases, they'll also have some menial powers, I believe, over penalty sizing, which the PDAO can vote on and then the council executes on. But mainly, it's the powers of the Guardian moved into the hands of the PDAO, the protocol DAO, into the hands of RPL stakers. And one last comment on the FIT stuff. It's interesting that Rocket Pool's quadratic voting is going to be huge in helping us mitigate 20% of voting power belonging to any one entity. That's something that we can do that no one else can. And so when they have, like, if you're a Paradigm LDO holder, they don't have a way to mitigate their voting power. They just have it.
That's true. We already have it, and we've been doing it forever, right? Since the beginning, we've been doing quadratic, I think. Isn't that right?
Yep. Half square root.
Yeah. Anything to
the
add to
Security
that?
Council. I'm curious to see, like, do you guys have ideas of who you might want to see elected to such a council?
Val, not sure.
The usual suspects. We can't let our Val bus factor get too high.
I don't know.
Do we know
I'm not sure.
how many members will be on the Security Council?
Sure. I think 9 or 13, I think.
That sounds right. 9 would be a good amount.
Yeah. So it's likely that, well, I don't know. Like there was a bit of panic a few months ago about the community not like getting its act together and like picking a Security Council, but we realized that we can keep going with like the Guardian system, like even though we have like on-chain voting temporarily, so that kind of like alleviated that little bit of panic. But I think Yoakum is working on some ideas about selecting the Security Council, and I guess the community has just been so busy with the tokenomics stuff. The same people who would be working on getting the Security Council stuff set up are the same people who are working on the tokenomics rework. So like Jasper said, then you have limited bandwidth. So hopefully that is going to be the next tackling factor for them. So we can expect some work on that maybe in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Sure. Okay, so now there's another second, you could call it second or third big change is stake ETH on behalf of a node. Okay, so this opens up stuff for, I believe, some marriages and for maybe some stake on behalf. So maybe this helps node set. So let's talk about that because that's a major component. Wack, do you want to introduce us a little bit to the stake ETH on behalf of a node?
Yeah, so it's actually a pair of upgrades here together. So there's stake ETH on behalf of a node and also RPL withdrawal address. So the way that it works right now is with the Atlas upgrade, or maybe even with Redstone, I think it was Atlas upgrade, what we had was stake RPL on behalf of, and that was it makes it a lot easier to stake RPL for a node from an arbitrary address. So you don't have to go through the command line interface. You don't have to sell RPL to your node, which is a hot wallet. You can just do it directly from like a multisig or a hardware wallet, and you can stake it from there directly. So this made it more secure to add RPL to a node. Also, like it removed some trust assumptions if there was some kind of marriage. Like I was in the marriage with Ramana, and I used stake RPL on behalf to add RPL on that because I didn't want Ramana to touch the RPL basically. Now with the RPL withdrawal address as well, so that was stake RPL on behalf, right? With stake ETH on behalf, it's the same idea where someone can just put ETH directly into a new validator without having to put ETH on the node and then the node operator do it. So, like you said, this is an update that will really help NodeSet a lot. It will basically put their protocol, they'll be able to stake ETH on behalf of validators, they'll be able to stake RPL on behalf of validators, and it will mean that the validators, the node operators, won't be touching the ETH or the RPL at any point. So it will give them really good security assumptions. Now, the second part of this, like you said, is the RPL withdrawal address. So currently, your node has a withdrawal address. Any ETH or RPL that leaves the node has to go to that address. Well, with the addition of the RPL withdrawal address, what we'll do is we will have ETH from a node going to one address and RPL from the node going to another address. So these two things together, that's where we get these marriages that you were mentioning, and it opens the possibilities of that happening. Now, that's because, Jasper here could be the node operator, I could be the RPL provider, Pat, you could be the ETH provider. Jasper will set up the node, so the withdrawal addresses are set up, the ETH going to the right person, the RPL going to the right person. Jasper then doesn't even have to touch and will never touch the RPL or the ETH. We will stake those on behalf of ourselves onto the node, and then Jasper will just run the node, and when the time comes, we'll get the ETH and the RPL back. So it's a really nice way to lead to marriages, which will now, of course, also be protocol level marriages instead of ad hoc and smart contract based marriages, which is what we have at the moment. And with this, will be audited by the best in the business. So there's going to be levels of trust in these updates that we just don't have at the moment with marriages, and elements within them that will make it just much more convenient. So that's where the idea of marriage, like protocol level marriages, comes from, or the possibility of them. And then, of course, with NodeSet as well, they'll be able to remove the relationship between the ETH provider, the RPL provider, and the node operator as well. So they'll be then using their own smart contracts to build upon this system, which will make NodeSet's constellation possible, which is really exciting. So those are the two kind of like twin upgrades that work harmoniously to open the potential for some really exciting stuff. Jasper, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these.
Yeah, so definitely this dual angle of value here coming in, whereby you have NodeSet, who is finally now going to be able to launch and get going, spinning up their validators. Big shout out to NodeSet. They've attracted over 200 node operators for
300.
300 now, wow, from the Rock Pool community, ready to go for Constellation. And they've had testnets running, even though their code isn't live. And it's really inspiring to see them build on top of Rocket Pool, like this layer 2 come to light. Their ability within Constellation to enable node operators to run additional validators on top is going to be a lovely stopgap while we're working on the tokenomics aspects of the protocol. And I think a lot of people have sort of undersold the impact that Constellation can have in allowing our node operator size, or the capabilities of our node set to expand. So it's going to be really fascinating to see that aspect play out. And then at the same time, we have institutional level whale marriages finally in the protocol. And I think the fact that it is within the protocol now is massive. These 9, 10, 11 finger institutions are not going to be, playing with smart contracts written by Romana. As much as we all love Romana,
Or
uh,
Maso.
or so, yeah,
Yeah.
as much as we love them, they're just not going to use them. I mean, the risk is tremendous there. And no shade to any party here. I mean, it's just rational decision making all around. But with the in protocol level, now it becomes, rational to start engaging in this stuff. And I'm not sure if we want to get into it, but, Denver was an amazing experience for many
Let's get
reasons.
into it. Let's get into it.
Let's
That's
get
what we're
into
here
it.
to
Maybe
do.
we shouldn't.
Well, why don't
Let's
we?
keep some alpha
Not
so we can buy some
specifics.
more RPL.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
no,
We should be
that's gonna
careful
go-
with what we say.
Yeah,
We should be
yeah.
careful
Yeah.
with what we say.
I
Well,
think
why don't we
we
generally-
can hint things.
Generally, yeah. Why don't we generally talk about what was some of the ideas floating around Denver about institutions, and are they interested? Is there a comfortability, or are they still hesitant because of this whole regulatory thing? Rocket Pool was listed in the lawsuit the SEC has with Consensus. Consensus mentioned Rocket Pool by name in their legal documents. So does that put a pause on institutions' interest in staking with Rocket Pool, or do they see it the other way and they're like, wow, look, I'm reading over this Fit 21 bill, and Rocket Pool looks like coming out of the gate, it's going to be okay. So what do you guys, Jasper, what do you think?
I think, there's an easy way to find an answer. Does MetaMask still offer RETH?
Yes.
It does. The SEC called RETH an unregistered security offering, yet Consensus continues to offer it.
No, the SEC didn't
Oh, sorry.
mention. Yeah, it's
Yes,
Rocket
you're
Pool.
right. You're right. You're right.
They
Yeah.
mentioned the staking system as in their
Yes.
Wells notice as being
Yes.
offering, like they didn't mention anything by name, but then
The broad scheme. Yes.
yeah,
Correct.
and then
Right.
Consensus is the one who mentioned it in their countersuit, basically, or
Right.
their preemptive lawsuit, more like.
But
yeah.
it's fairly clear what the SEC was getting at. I mean, there is only two options available within MetaMask staking, and the fact that they are still gung-ho allowing it and defending it, to me, it's a sign of confidence rather than fear.
Yeah.
And I think that will play out, like, once one major institution makes a move, the dominoes begin to fall.
So, Jasper, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you heard in Denver? Like, you don't have to go into specifics or anything,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like, give us some details.
I'm just going to start by saying that there was material non-public information going around, which should be interesting enough to be acted on anyway. But more specifically, yet broadly, within the first day at Denver, I was getting DMs asking me if I knew if these very specific, awesome rumors were true from the get-go. And then as Denver progressed, it was just like more and more information coming to light that, wow, these rumors are substantial and substantiated.
Yes.
So
So,
when we're talking about institutions, what kind of, we're talking about 1,000 ETH, 10,000 ETH, 100,000 ETH. I mean, what is considered institutional, and just in general, what's considered institutional staking
so
in
we
terms
have
of ETH?
1KX who stakes with us right now, and they have hundreds of validators, so thousands of ETH. The names that were going around in Denver were big players. Yeah. So these are like, on the scale of tens of thousands of ETH potentially. And like we said, there's no guarantee that this is going to happen. Like there's no none of us are saying that this is definitely like guaranteed to happen. Like the day after Houston goes live, none of that stuff. It's just the rumors that we heard that was substantiated to some amount, and also like it makes sense from a logical perspective as well. So all of those things together means that I now own more RPL than I've ever owned in my life, and that's part of the thing that goes together with that, right? Like that's all I'm saying. Like don't follow me, not financial advice, any of that stuff, or legal advice or any of that tax advice. Yeah, Jasper, go ahead.
Yeah, here are some factual statements. Consensus stated in their roadmap years ago, this was the fabled Gigabread, that they're planning to stake their treasury with Rocket Pool. Now, it's been mum's the word since, but, if there was ever an event that allowed them to, in a risk-minimized fashion, participate, this would be the one.
Yeah.
Another factual thing is Coinbase Ventures sold RPL. What do they want to put that down? And I remember there was rumors of people trying to figure out what their node actually was. Because once the ventures guy came in to talk about it, I don't recall if we ever figured out their node. But again,
Maybe, yeah, yeah.
it's the same situation though, where we know that these institutions are already participating to some degree in the ecosystem, and now we've just given them a huge leg up to engage further.
Right. Do you see, in terms of timeframes, so if you're an institution, are you going to say, okay, let's give this 90 days, this Houston, to see if give it a little bit of Lindy, or am I going to just jump right in, or am I going to maybe, let's start out with 1,000 ETH, just and kind of
Baby
dribble it
amount.
in over time, a baby amount,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, test them
So
out.
in terms of adoption, what can we look forward to if it's going to happen? Is it going to take a month, 3 months, 6 months before we start to see it? What do you expect, Jasper?
I think there's going to be different paces for different institutions. The institutions that are closer to Rocket Pool will probably move quicker. For example, Consensus was the only investor in Rocket Pool back in 2018. They were the only ones allowed. And, from my understanding, they've stayed relatively connected with the
And an
team.
ODAO member,
They're an ODAO
Mm-hmm.
member. And so if
and
there
auditing as
was,
well through Sigma Prime.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good
So if there was
relationship.
any big institution that would be an early mover, my money would be on Consensus, given their long relationship history. But saying that, it still makes sense when you're this like mega player to have periods of waiting before you ape into stuff.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So then the question becomes, where is the RPL going to come from?
Yes, that's the second half of this, right?
Yeah.
It's a
Thoughts?
good question, and the demand for RPL will arise as these players want to start earning the best staking yield they can. Aave rates are already like 3-4%. I'm earning some great yield, not even on a node.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there are some major RPL whales in the ecosystem who could make great partners, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. I think like looking at the list of the big holders on RocketScan, you can start thinking of how things might look using that, with some of the known addresses. And there's some glaring examples, like once you start scratching the surface of really big holders who are sat on idle RPL, that, would trust the product of the team to use it, and would put RPL in there. Going back to your question that you posited to Jasper, Pat, about how long this would take, I think there's a version of this timeline where some of these entities start off with smaller validator nodes, maybe 1,000 ETH potentially, maybe like even smaller than that, just like 5, 10, 20 mini pools. And then as they see things are okay, they'll just add more and more in time, potentially. Or like Jasper said, there's a reality as well where we get some movement with size quite quickly. But I think the fact of the matter is as soon as we see that first one, then it's going to be a light bulb moment, not just for the community but like for the wider ecosystem, that hey, something has changed here, and this has now become a reality that wasn't a reality before. And I think that will be a really really good thing to see. Like that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, last question here. So if you say you're a big RPL whale and you have a decision, you can do a marriage, say with Consensus, or you can drop it in a node set, right? And get yield there. What is the economic incentive to do either? Like they're going to do what's in their best interest, but how do you see node set competing with trying to get, RPL to match up with ETH and vice versa? Like what do you guys think?
Jasper, do you want to go first, then I can share ideas?
Sure. So my understanding is the XRPL product is still being planned to release with the initial version of NodeSet. So that will give them a strong leg up. Having a liquid token available to then maybe use in DeFi, or even just like a simple XRPL RPL AMM pool is going to be awesome. So there's a lot of potential there for XRPL to allow them to suck up retail size players, and then institutional size players are probably going to want that 1-to-1 consensus level matching. So it seems to me like we have a
Two
menu
different markets,
yeah.
a retail market, and which node set maybe is tailored for, and then the institutional size. they're just going to stick with going directly through Rocket Pool and with the Houston?
I think the one thing to consider as well is that, NodeSet will completely break down the relationship between the ETH provider, the RPL provider, and the node operator. Whereas with some of these marriages, the RPL holder or the ETH holder can be the validator themselves. They can be the node operator themselves. And that will give a level of control and trust in the system that they might want, if that makes sense.
Right.
An institution like X comes in, they'll say, hey, we want to operate this validator ourselves because we know that, we won't get slashed, we won't have port uptime, like any of this kind of stuff. We want as much control over the process as possible. Then that will be attractive to some entities. And also there's the fact of getting outsized rewards. So as a NodeSet depositor, you will get commission-free staking rewards, but the bonuses on top, you won't be getting any of those. Like you won't be getting the multiples of solo staking rewards, and you as an RPL reward holder, you'll actually be paying a commission as well. So that might not be attractive to some people, whereas with a Houston, protocol grade marriage, the ETH holder will be getting outsized ETH rewards. The RPL holder will be getting the full allocation of their RPL rewards. So that might factor into it as well. So there are a couple of different levels of thinking that people who want to stake will do, and then they'll work out which one of those options is the best for them. But the great thing is that we'll have multiple options now. Going forward, we'll have multiple options that we don't have right now. Because right now, to stake with Rocket Pool, you pretty much have to be the node operator yourself, the ETH provider yourself, and the RPL provider yourself. And there's some small ways of getting around that with splitter contract marriages, etc., and other ideas that people are having. But this is just going to open up the game in a really, really great way. So I'm super, super pumped for it.
Jasper, you've been generous with your time. Do you have any final thoughts on Houston and Rocket Pool going forward?
I have a question for y'all, a philosophical question. Is Rocket Pool compromising on maximal decentralization with its shift towards institutions and abstracted marriages?
That was a concern NodeSet brought up, wasn't it? Remember at Denver?
That's
they were talking about
slightly different.
Yeah,
that's slightly
Which
different.
I think it's a little funny that it's present in both upgrades, but it was only mentioned in one. But I am quite asking about this one.
So I'll let Pat go first, and then I can answer if you want. Pat, I can go first. It's up to you.
The answer is a little bit, yes, I think. In my point, how do you? I mean, it's an open market, and in a free market, you have whales and you have small retail, and then everything in between. I think we're doing our best to remain decentralized, but how do you stop a whale from coming in and wanting to use your protocol, right? Because you see maximum yield, and I can make money, and we can manage that as best we can, which I think we're doing. But there's going to be a friction there. So that's the short answer. Whack?
Yeah, so Jasper, going to your question, right? I think we are sacrificing some decentralization. However, I think there's a interesting analog here with some of the other Saturn upgrades that we were talking about that will be coming up that we've been talking about in the community. So with Saturn, one of the things that's happening is we're letting the collateral level go down from 8 RPL down to 8 ETH down to 4 ETH in Saturn 1 and 1.5 ETH in Saturn 2. And one of the reasons why this is happening is because we realized just how maximally efficient, totally cautious we were with collateral levels that we might not need to be. There's scope for some give here, just we did with Atlas, where we went from 16 ETH validators only to 8 ETH validators. We saw 16 was too much. So there's this idea, right, that decentralization is in the spectrum. On one end, you have Rocket Pool, which is the most maximally decentralized protocol, liquid staking protocol or liquid restaking protocol as well, in all of Ethereum. On the other end, you'll have encrypt. Yeah, exactly. And on the other end, you'll have some centralized exchange or staking ETF or whatever, which will be completely centralized staking. That's this whole spectrum. And I think what we're realizing is that by Rocket Pool being so far on one extreme edge, we can actually give a little bit and take a little bit of a step, towards a slightly more centralized stance, but still retaining the vast majority of our decentralization, that makes the protocol what it is. So that tiny bit of sacrifice, I think, just like we sacrifice a tiny bit of security by allowing LEB 8s and LEB 4s, we can allow sacrifice a tiny bit of decentralization to like unlock this huge potential of growth, and then in that growth itself, as more state comes to Rocket Pool, Ethereum as a whole becomes more decentralized, either moving from centralized exchanges or whatever, or like even something like Lido, as it moves along the decentralization stack, we're actually pulling more and more of Ethereum to be more decentralized. So that's kind of my perspective on it. I think like, the Chris Blecks of this world and others might say that, sacrifice any decentralization at all shouldn't happen. But I think it's necessary for Rocket Pool's growth to take these steps. Otherwise, people won't choose Rocket Pool. It's as simple as that.
Fully agree. Fully agree. I think your sentiments
Echo Vitalik's sentiment when he talks about convex versus concave worldviews, right? Like we have Rocket Pool right now, arguably
as far
decentralized as you can get in terms of economics, at least. And perhaps the entire Ethereum ecosystem is better off if Rocket Pool is closer to the middle. And I tend to strongly agree with that, as long as, we remain cognizant of the centralizing pressures and work to, move towards an end state where we hit our goals without tending towards centralized over time. Ethereum is definitely better off with Rocket Pool being, 10% or 15% of the total stake and, like a little less decentralized versus being 1% of stake and maximally decentralized.
Right.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, guys, it's been a great discussion. Some alpha in there. I'm more excited now about Houston because of it. Coming June 17th. Please like and subscribe the podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Jasper, thanks for sharing all your knowledge and coming on the show with us this morning. We really appreciate it. And keep up all the great work you do. And I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you have enough hours in the day to do what you do, but we are the beneficiaries of it. So thank you so much.
Stay awesome, everyone.
Thanks, Jasper.
Okay.
Thanks,
and Whack, we'll see you next week. And everyone, have a great week and take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.